Hello and welcome to this series in which we'll measure, model, print and build this Mr. Handy Echo Dot holder. This is a three-part series where we cover measurement and initial modelling in this episode. Episode 2 covers additional detail and posing our model, and then finally episode 3 covers making the joints of our model, slicing, printing and then assembly. So let's not waste any more time and jump straight into it. So to begin, we need to get the measurement of our Alexa speaker, and because it's flat on the bottom, that means it can just sit there, but because the top is round, like so, I'm just going to bring in an old 3D print that I've got, but it's got a hole in the middle, so that can hold this in place. So this is the light, and I like the idea of keeping this on show, and because the dome is going to do quite a bit of the heavy lifting, I'm basically just going to create a little cusp. Basically, it's to prevent it from sliding off and falling over. We don't need a whole sort of dome, like say the speaker does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So basically, we're just creating a stand, and to begin with this stand, I'm going to measure just where the light begins. And that is going to bring us to approximately 70.3 millimeters. So we'll just write that down. We'll bring this over here, and then we're going to do base, go on, and then upper is 70.3 millimeters, and then our lower is going to be 62 by the looks of it, so 62 millimeters. May as well give it some breathing room than no breathing room, because we don't want to print this and then basically it sits above it and it's not actually sat in our model. So I'll probably just give that a couple millimeters extra as well, just for 3D printing tolerance. And then yeah, so the mid area, which is where the eyes are going to stick up from, the Amazon website specifies that this is 100 millimeters by 100 millimeters, and then top to bottom it's something like 89. So I'm going to go on the basis that this is 100. We're going to make sure that we have a little bit of flexibility, so it's going to be like sort of a narrow strip that comes up the sides for the eyes. So I'm just going to keep that at mid-range is 100 millimeters. Then hopefully that's everything, and then now we can move on to hopefully modelling this. So here I have the designs of Mr. Handy across the Fallout universe. We've got Fallout 4 and 76 here, we've got the TV show here, we've got Fallout Shelter here, and then we have Fallout 3 and New Vegas here. So I believe this is a Mr. Gutsy that's sneaked in, because that is a plasma weapon, whereas if we look at Wadsworth, who lives in our Megaton house, he doesn't have the plasma weapon. He has a Flamethrower, Manipulator Arm and a Buzzsaw, like all the others. And that's one thing that we want to keep in mind for our design. We want to make it modular, so we can change, say, the ends. Because what if you wanted someone who had 2 flamethrowers and a buzzsaw, like the Prison Marshal in Fallout 76? I mean, what if you wanted 3 flamethrowers on yours, just like the director in Fallout 4? What if you wanted to be a bit whimsical and also add a fan design like Mr. Frothy in the Nuka World DLC of Fallout 4? So this is what we want. So even though it's a Mr. Handy that we're basically modelling and designing, Mr. Gutsy is just simply a variant of Mr. Handy. So that's what we want to do. We want to make this fun, we want to make it ours. We don't want to just have one design and it's all fixed in place. So with our Mr. Handy model, we only have to design 1/3 of him, basically. So to begin, I'm going to preface this with I'm going to model the Fallout 4 76 TV show Fallout Shelter design. I just feel like it's got a bit more personality, and I'll explain why. because this one just has spherical eyes. There's nothing wrong with that. This one is more oval shaped, the eye actually comes out a little bit. Got this little bit of paneling and, you know, the arm that keeps it in the main body of the Mr. Handy. This looks like little spindly pieces. I understand that they were made in their time, so we probably couldn't afford too much geometry for the Mr. Handy models, but it's just like the arms. These look like the same parts, just scaled down. And basically, yeah, this one looks like it's got the design incorporated, so when he's almost flat packed and shipped away in a box, that can fold in there, folds in there, folds in there, or maybe not folds in there, but basically it looks like different parts of his arm can fold in and make him more compact, whereas this one is just, it is what it is. So to begin, basically we're going to have our Alexa speaker, which is going to basically sit like that. And then to begin, we're going to have our little cusp that holds it in place so it doesn't slide forwards or backwards, left or right. That's what we took our measurements for. And as we can see with this one, it comes down a little bit before we hit this bit of a cylinder that connects to the thruster. So we're just going to bring that down. This isn't going to be a work of art, and it's also not going to be to scale. So now that we've got that, we can see that the, what I would call the shoulder, comes away from this. So it looks like we're going to have a bit of a part there, which basically is going to stick out. Then we're going to come out by quite a bit, and then we're going to come down by about 90 degrees. And if we look at the Marshall, I believe it was, we can see that we've got a cylinder here. So it looks like as that rotates clockwise or anti-clockwise, this then spins because it's basically touching it. I don't know the true anatomy of a Mr. Handy, but that would just be my assumption basically. So what we're going to do is we're just going to have a cylinder that basically sits here, and then also it looks like that our arm basically just comes out a little bit, but for our 3D printing standpoint we're going to basically have this here, and then it's going to attach to our cylinder for the main part of our arm, and then we're going to come down, and then this is going to basically be the first part of our arm that's completed. This is going to be slightly hollow on the inside because we want to keep true to the design, but we also don't want to lose strength by making it too thin, so we will model it accordingly. We're not actually going to design it so it's flat packable. However, I do want to design this so it can actually have moving parts, so you can either have the arms all splayed out, for example, or you can have it so it's a bit like this. So we don't really want them fixed in place, however I suppose you could model it so they are, but for me I want to model it so it's basically an action figure almost. So getting back to this, we basically have our first part of the arm done, and then now what we want to do is model the second part. So for me that's going to be basically, it's basically just going to be a bunch of cuboids, and then we're going to have our little armour, what looks like our armour plating that basically curves out there. Then we're going to have a bit that's on the inside, so presumably another cylinder style. So this is now going to come out this way, like so. And then this one, as you can see here, from a top-down perspective, it's going to be a shape that's like this here. So it's going to be hollow in the centre, so I'm just going to mark that like that. And then that is basically what's going to hold this. But again, we're not actually going to flat pack it, but we can try and get as close to detail as we can. So from a side point of view, it will literally just look like this. And then lastly, we'll have this little spindly bit that basically holds the tool or equipment at the end. So for this, I want to design it so it's got a bit of an indentation on either side, because if we did end up bringing in, say, this plasma weapon, we can see that the connection appears to be that it holds the canister, I'm going to call it there, and the attachment goes on the outside of this. So what we can do is, if this was our cylinder that we've held onto, we can then bring the arm down like so, but we're going to angle it in, and then we're going to have a little ball shape towards the end there, and then basically as it is forced down onto it, it will basically move outwards a little bit, and then it will eventually basically rest inside there. But if we look at the pincer arm, or manipulator arm should I say, you can see that it goes sort of in the arm. It doesn't actually go on the outside, or does it? The quality isn't exactly the best, if I'm absolutely honest. Manipulator arm, yeah, it does look like it sort of goes on the inside. Might look into this a little bit further, but we can either forget the law, and basically if we model this shape here, we can just put the pincer or manipulator arm on it there, or what we can do is we can model a little cap that goes over this, and basically what it will be is it will in itself it will have these little indentations here that will basically go over that. So we'll basically just model it like so, and then what we'll have is our arm, or our manipulator arm should I say, will just come in from the inside there, and then it will just be shaped like this. Again, what we're doing here is keeping in mind that we're going to have not this design, we're going for this. So once you've modelled one arm, or one main component, so once you've modelled this section, you've basically modelled all the other arms. The only other part is the equipment. And then lastly, we do have the thruster, and the thruster looks like it comes in, down a bit, out a bit, and then sort of angles like that. And then this will be our, I can't really work invertedly, so if we just move it like that, and then, yeah, like I say, not a work of art. And then lastly, we've got our eyes. So we're going to have our oval shape for our eye. We can print on a piece of A4 paper a camera shutter, for example, to get our eye bit. And then, like I say, we're going to keep 3D printing in mind, so then we're going to have like a really thin panel. Might print that separately and then just glue it on. And then primarily we've got our arm that basically sticks this to our Alexa gadget. And then lastly, it depends how you want to do this. There's possibly two ways of modelling this. So I'm probably going to model it where we've got basically a stem that goes through the thruster, like so, and then it basically has a wide base to prevent it from toppling over easily. And what we can do is we can model some little grippers for the cable to basically flow down, and then goes out, and then away. The other thing we can do is basically model a thing that comes out towards the back of our main design, and then that just comes down, and then same result, basically has this massive cylinder. But I'll probably just go with the thruster down the centre with the stem. I believe there's probably one other way of doing this, and that would involve, it wouldn't look as good because I suppose he's meant to look like he's hovering, but we could have the arms so they are fixed, and then he just sits on his arms, because his arms are going to be longer than his thruster, but then he's sat on his arms. It maybe loses its appeal and magic. But either way, this is going to be the design we're going for, this one here. So yeah, now that we've got that out the way, we can now actually move on to the modelling aspect. So now that we've got our reference images and the design that we're basically going for, I'm going to go into Blender now and basically delete all of this, split this window in the bottom right corner, and then I'm just going to turn this into a text editor and click New. And that's because I want to grab these measurements over here and basically just put them in, so we've got them to the side. And what I'm going to start off with is I'm going to model the speaker itself, so we have a frame of reference for how the rest of the model is doing. So I'm going to import a UV sphere. I'm going to increase the segments to 64 and the rings to 32, and then our radius is going to be 50mm because the radius is from centre to rim, and I believe the diameter is from side to side. So now that we've got this 10cm all around, we now need to make it 8.9cm from top to bottom. So I'm going to import a plane and make that, I believe, 100mm. And what we've got is we've got 50mm above and 50 below, so we need to move this down on the Z by negative, I believe, 0.039, and then what we can do is go into edit mode, extrude down, select our sphere, and then what we can do is move into our modifiers, add one, generate a boolean, and if you find that it doesn't actually cut out the sphere, what we can do is we can just make it a float, apply, delete our plane, and now we should have a 8.9 centimeters. So I'm going to call this our echo dot, and then our collection is going to be our reference. So now that we've done that, what we can do now is we can save our progress for where we are. I'm going to make a new folder and call this our Mr. Handy Echo Holder, which is now over here, and then we're going to make our Blender file, and then we're just going to save it in here. So this is going to be called our Mr. Handy Echo Holder, and then just like that we can now progress. So now that we've modelled our reference, I'm going to move this up on the Z by 0.039, Control A to apply its location. We're going to make a new collection, and then this is going to be called our Mr. Handy collection. Not Mr. Handy, it's going to be Mr. Handy, like so. We're going to indent this because we've done that, and now we're going to work on our cusp, and these are our measurements. So to begin, I'm going to bring in a circle. We're going to match the vertices to our reference. And because we don't know the radius, but we know the diameter, I'm going to put 70.3 divided by 2 millimeters. We know it goes up on the Z by 4.77, so we're going to put 4.77 millimeters. So if you put mm, it's millimeters. If you put cm, centimeters, m is meters, and then it works the same with in with inches and ft for feet, but we work in millimeters for this one. So now that we've made that, we can bring in another circle, and this one is going to be 61.9 divided by 2 millimeters. And then now we can hide our reference. We can select both of these, Control J to join, go into edit mode with edge select, right click, bridge edge loops. So the issue with this that we've got at the minute is they are straight, they're not like rounded in any way. And the other thing is, as much as I trust my calipers, we were sort of eyeballing it because we weren't definitively grabbed onto the edges. So what I'm going to do is, as practice, it was great to basically work on these, but I'm going to bring back our sphere that Blender's given us, and I'm going to scale this out on everywhere but the Z and make it so they just make an appearance. Same with this bottom one. And then what we can do is, with the top one selected, I'm just going to Alt S, and then we're going to max out our tolerance. So I'm going to do 0.0005, and then we're going to put this back to 0 there. And then with this one selected, I'm going to do Shift S, cursor to selected, which is basically the world origin. Then we're going to do Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. And that's because when we move this, that number also changes, so we're going to do Alt S, and then we're going to do 0.0005, and as you can see we've gone to negative that number, so now we're going to put 0, so now we're back at 0 on the Z. That's still at 477 millimeters, and then what we can do now is we can come down, add a modifier and generate a solidify. It's gone inwards instead of outwards, so we just need to move this out, and we're going to make it half a centimeter. And then what we can do is select the bottommost ring. If we just hide our reference here, and then we hide this, we've got our bottommost ring, and then we can add a face, and then we can bring this back and we can apply even thickness. So this is ideally what we've got, but however, what I want is, I want to make sure that this is basically right, so I'm going to 3D print this independently, just so we can see if it does actually fit the speaker, because the things like the arms, they don't matter. if you fit the speaker or not. They are just scaled within the model itself, but because this actually houses the speaker, we need to make sure that the speaker fits in this, so then everything else we model later is scaled accordingly. So for now, I'm just going to remove the face, and then I'm going to apply this solidify modifier, and then we just need to make it so that our bottom here is matched up with there. And basically, if this fits, great. If it doesn't, then we'll soon find out. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to save, and then we're going to work on our thruster. So now that we've modelled this and we know that it fits, it means that we can rename this to Cradle. And now we can get to work on the thruster. So with the thruster, it looks like it's connected to the main body when you look at these model references and their camera angle. But if we were to look at the prison marshal, we'll see that there's a bit of a gap here between what I would call the shoulders and the head, and the same can be seen with the director as well. There's the shoulders, there's the top of the head, or the bottom of the head, and then this is a gap, and then we've got our thruster here. And the other thing to keep in mind is the thruster actually looks quite thin compared to the rest of the model, so we'll just inset a circle basically, and then we'll just extrude it straight down. So what we're going to do is, with edge mode selected, we're going to select this edge, scale it in on Shift Z to about there, and then because this was for our 3D printing test, we can bring this back down. Control 7 to look directly underneath, and then again we can scale and Shift Z until it looks like it's in line, like so. And then what we can do is face mode, Alt, and then loop select, X, delete faces, and then with edge mode selected we can loop select the top part, make a face, loop select the bottom part, and then we can fill by making a face. We'll bring in our echo dot, so we've got our reference, and then what we can do is we can inset this face to about here, I think, and then we'll extrude by 0.055. So the next part is we'll start looking at making our shoulder part, which looks like it's extruded in as well. So as we can see, if we zoom in a little bit, our shoulder sort of ends where our head curvature also ends. So what we'll do is we'll come into Blender, and then we can press 1, we can Control R to make a loop cut, and then we'll make it about here, I think. We'll do Control B so we get this, and then what we can do is Alt E and then extrude faces along normals, and then put them to about here, I believe, somewhere like that. And what we can do is make a loop cut in here, and then just for design's sake we can loop select these faces, then extrude them down like so. So we're going to look at the Fallout shelter for our reference for the thruster design, because as you can see it's basically a down, in, down, out, in. Same can be seen with this one, it's basically down, out, in. So basically, yeah, we'll keep in mind for both of them. I believe that this part looks definitively longer than this part, say, but basically we're not looking for a super accurate model. This is basically just something for fun. So what we'll do is we'll make our initial loop cut about here, because judging by our design, the top bit is quite thin and narrow. The bit that comes in seems to travel quite a bit, so what we need to do is basically, I'd say even maybe move this up a little bit more, and then we'll bring in a loop cut that's about there, so that bit's quite long. So now what we've got to do is we've got to model this centre bit here. So that looks quite long in our Fallout shelter, but Fallout 4 and 76, it's not too long, so we'll sort of eyeball this one to being about, I'd say maybe somewhere like there maybe. So we've got to go a bit between the two. I mean, for our Fallout shelter model, it is definitely at least a third, almost, maybe. And then as we can see, the next part is relatively thin, and then it goes quite long, whereas this side is also quite thin, and then it goes quite long. So our next loop cut will basically be sort of here, and then we might even have to bring this up on the Z by maybe negative 0.005. Yeah, somewhere like that. So then what we can do is we can bring this up a little bit more. Alright, so now that we've got this, basically what we're after doing now is we've got our bit that comes straight down. So then we've got to select this one and this one because these are the same size. And then if we just bring that to about there, then this one can also come in just a little bit. And then finally our bottom of our thruster will just come in and give us this general shape here. And then just so that we haven't got basically all these sharp edges, what we can do is we can just maybe not these ones actually, because that is what our shoulders are going to connect to. We just need to loop select these, that one, that one, that one and that one. And then what we'll do is Control B and bevel, give it 3 loop cuts, and then hopefully this will round off some of our edges so we look a bit smoother. And then that's our thruster basically. Looking at our reference to an extent. Yeah, I mean, it's weird because the thruster is way smaller than you think in comparison to the rest of Mr. Handy. Now what we're doing is we're looking at designing the shoulder. So if we look at this image, the way I see this is that this part, which is also this one, it belongs to this arm, and the part of the shoulder is we have the inner cylinder that sits about there. It looks like it gets extruded out a little bit onto a plate here. That plate also has another cylinder that is basically attached to it. And then towards the back it comes around here, and then that's connected to another plate that goes this way. And that looks like half a cylinder that is also extruded out. And then we just have this little shoulder pad sort of grip, as I would call it, there. So in terms of designing and modelling this, it's going to be a bit complicated, I believe, but we will try our best. So with this in view, what we're going to do is basically import a cylinder. We're going to make it 64 vertices, and then we're just going to change the radius to something like 0.05, and then we'll change our depth to say 10 millimeters. Why not? So now that we've got something that's a bit more visible, we'll just drag this over on the Y, because we're going to basically free ball this, if that's the phrase. So basically we're going to rotate this on the Y by 90 degrees. And then basically we're just going to scale it down on everything but the X till we get about this size, and then we're going to scale it on the X to about that. So Control A and scale, Control A and rotation. So this is the bit that the arm connects to. So like I said before, what we can then do is it looks like we need to find the very top of our cylinder, which looks like it's this edge here, and then we just need to come all the way down and do the same with our bottom, which looks like it's going to be that one there. And what we want to do is extrude on the Y and then scale Y0. So this is our wheel, and then what we need is we basically just need to select these, Shift D, move them on the Y over this way, and then we just need to rotate on the Z by 90 degrees with edge mode selected, right click, and then bridge edge loops. So now that we've got this, what we can do is we can scale these up a little bit on the Y, maybe even thin them out on the Y, and then what we can do is just snap them here. So what we've got so far is we've got our main wheel here, and then we've got this one that comes around there. So now we just need to make a little back plate that sits on that, and I'm not 100% certain with what shape that little back plate has. It looks like it's basically just a square, and then there's like a little bolt or something that basically keeps this one in place. So we can extrude a cube, or maybe even get a circle, and then we can drag the bottom half down here, and then, in fact, yeah, maybe just flatten the top part of the circle when it comes up here. So we'll do just that. So what we can do is import a circle, and then we'll just make sure that it's got 64 vertices. And then what we can do is, because we're in edit mode, we'll just scale this all the way down like so, and then we'll move it on the Y so it meets us here. So we need to rotate this on the X by 90 degrees, and it basically just needs to sit approximately there. Whoops, didn't mean to move that back on the Y so it's about there. Yeah, so basically we need our circle to sit just below the halfway line on our inner cylinder. So that looks about right there. I mean, we also need to scale this down massively, I believe. So now we can move it to more about here. And then what we can do is, with our vertex mode, we'll find this one. So we've got that all the way to what looks like it goes across here, so we can delete those vertices, and then we can connect that with a face, and then what we can do is select, or Control L to select linked. We can make a face, and then what we can do is, with edge mode selected, select that top edge, and then we'll just extrude it up on the Z, so it's about here. And then with face mode selected, we can basically extrude this out a little bit like so. So now that we've modelled this little bit here, we now just need to basically do the same, but this part looks a little bit thicker. So Control, with this selected, Control plus, and then what we can do is Shift D, move it up on the Z, and then rotate on the X by negative 90 degrees. It looks like it's a bit bigger in general, so what we can do is just scale it up a little bit and then move it over on the Y, and then what we can do is just snap it back on the Y so it's about there, and bring it down on the Z so it meets about there. So far what we've got is this bit. We'll do all the additional little details after, but at the moment we're trying to get the core geometry. So we've got our inner cylinder here, we've got our bigger cylinder, so that needs bringing out a little bit realistically. That's probably about the right size. This needs to be made a little bit thicker, and then we just need to make a little bit on top, but we can probably get away with just insetting the face and extruding it up. So yep, what we can do is select that and that, move it up a bit, and then what we can do is inset, and then we'll move it over on the Y to about there, and then because what we probably actually need to do is scale it up a little bit more, and then again move it over on the Y, and then extrude like so. So now if we pull up our Marshall image, which is there, so we've got this bit now, and then yeah, it looks like that's not necessarily a 90-degree corner, but this is basically what we've got. And then if we bring over our collage, for example, it looks like we've got our main cylinder here, we've got our other one here, we've got a little back plate, and we've got the main one, then we've got this, so now it just needs to connect to the shoulder. So we can just mimic this by basically moving it over on the Y, snapping it to here, bring it down, and then we just need to scale it down in general, so approximately there. And then what we can do is just move it up a little bit, and then we just need to figure out where all this is in comparison to everything else. So yeah, it looks like that top bit needs to be in line with this bottom bit, and then yeah, we should be good for this part. So move it down so it's about there, and then we'll just move it in on the Y a little bit, and then like I said before, we just need to basically move this out a little bit. And then with X-ray mode, if we can just select basically all of these faces, Okay, I would have thought that shortest path might have worked, but that might not be the case. So if we just select all of these, like so, and then what we can do is move it in on the Y so it meets about there, and we've now made our little shoulder piece. So now we can look at modelling the first arm. So what we can do is rename this to shoulder and then save. Alright, so now that we've modelled the shoulder, we can model the first part of the arm, and the arm basically looks like it's a cylinder that's basically almost the same size as this. I think it's a little bit bigger because we can see a lip there. We've got a bit of an angle coming out, so we've got a bit of roundness and then it extrudes. If we look at the destroyed armour on this Mr. Handy, or Codsworth, because I believe this is Sanctuary by the looks of it, we can see that it's just a flat block. And one thing that sort of confused me with this is this little cylinder here. I couldn't tell if that was part of the first section of the arm or the second. If we look at the prison marshal, basically it looked like the first part of the arm had a clasp that held it in place, but if we look at this arm in particular, it looks like that these circles or cylinders belong to the first part and the second part of the arm is wedged in. Either way, it should look fine with a 3D print because we're not animating this as it's not really ours. So what I'm going to do is basically duplicate the circle, extrude out, extrude down, reverse the process with this. And one thing to maybe make note of is if we move our mouse sort of down as best as we can in a straight line, we'll see that the bottom is slightly offset. I'll try my best to showcase this again. So it's not perfectly in the middle, because if we look at this, I mean, I get that camera angles exist, but this part of the armour plating seems to be just past the centre. But if we come down, that same edge appears to meet in the middle of this here. So we'll just keep that in mind, but for now what we need to do is we need to make the shoulder a bit bigger, because it looks like the edge of the shoulder also comes towards the edge of the head of Mr. Handy here. And the other part is this arm appears to go just below the thruster, quite a bit below the thruster. If we pull up our prison marshal, we'll see that basically, yeah, if the thruster sort of ends here, we can see that the cylinder part is below it. So with that bit of information, we'll go to camera angle 3, or well, the number pad 3, and what we can do is just scale this up until it looks like it meets the head. So we can see that this line here exists, and then what we can do is just snap it back there and maybe scale it a little bit more. I don't want to go too crazy with it, and then we can basically just line this up there. So Control A for a scale. And the other part is with these circles, we do seem to get quite close to the other one, and we appear to have a bit of a gap here. So I'm just going to bring that in, Control L, scale up basically, and then snap on the Y back there. So now that we've done all that, what we can do is select this face here, Shift D, right click, P, separate selection, tab out, and then select this circle, and then this is going to be arm_1. We're then going to add a modifier, and it's going to be a mirror. And what we're going to do is we're just going to select this face and we're going to extrude it out so it's about the same width as the circle here. And then what we're going to do is select a few faces to angle it down. So I'm going to select approximately maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. So what we can do is, once we know what faces we want selected, we can go into Edge Mode, select here, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, bring out the spin tool, put it on the X, and then we'll spin it to about here. So that's about 85 degrees. We're going to make the steps to 1 because it is quite angular, and then we're going to do scale on the Z by 0. So now that we've done that, and we know it's about the length of the thruster, we're going to just extrude down to about here. Because now what we need to do is select this face, Shift D, and bring it down on the Z. Then we're going to scale it everywhere but the X so it's a bit smaller, and then we're going to move it on the Y because it needs to be a little bit offset. Then we're going to extrude and meet here, and I sense that the normals might be a bit reversed on this, so we're going to activate that overlay, basically Control L, Shift N, and then while we're here we may as well sort the shoulder out while we're here and Shift N. So now that we've got this, we need to find 8 faces. So what I'm going to do is maybe move it a bit more lower than the thruster, so move it to about here, and now we need 8 faces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 I think. Delete those, select this, Control, and then delete those. Select this edge, face, then select one edge, and then hopefully it will bridge the gap. Excellent. So that is our arm component, and now we just need to make the little shielding, or the armor plate. So the armor plate looks like it sits below the wheel and goes round, comes down to about here, and then it sort of sits towards there. If we pull up our reference image here, we'll see that it looks like it comes just below or just past the middle of that, I'm going to call it a wheel. Goes a bit flat and then raises up towards the angled piece, and then comes down, meets up at sort of in the middle of the lower part, but it's quite high, follows the circle going straight down, and then it comes back up. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is basically import a plane, scale it down massively, rotate on the X by 90, rotate on the Z by 180 because it's quicker than sorting the normals out, and then move it over on the X. Shift select this, Control J to bring them together. Didn't quite work the way I expected, so Shift N and then recalculate the normals to be on the inside, and then we're going to just bring this edge over here. We're going to activate clipping as well. Click that to get rid of the spin tool, and then if we just do that, and then it means these are now basically connected together. And what we can do is just bring that here. We will bring the edge down till it meets there, and then what we need to do is we need to extrude this edge on the Y to about here, and then we just need to bring it down so it's underneath. Then what we can do is basically bring this to about here, and again just snap it to there. Maybe we need to bring this back on the Y a little bit to about there. So we've got the flat bit and then it goes up. So now we can edge select the bottom here, scale on the Z by 0, bring it down, and then if we just analyze this one more time, so the leftmost part needs to be above the wheel, then that needs to sort of follow the wheel down to about here, and then the end sort of needs to come up. So with that in mind, what we can do is we can select our vertex here, bring that down so it's about there. In fact, it might even be best if we just snap it to about there, and then if we press 3 or Control 3, we can just bring it down so it's about there, and then in fact what we can do is maybe raise this a bit up. Now that we've got that, I'm going to basically add a couple of loop cuts about here, and that's because what we're going to do now is we're just going to make it a bit more round. So I'm also going to bevel this here so we've got a nicer, smoother edge going about it, and then I'm going to maybe add a couple of, in fact no, what we need to do actually is probably bring all of these over on the X a little bit to about there, Alright, now I can add maybe a couple of loop cuts here. So what I'm going to do is that corner's staying where it is, and then we'll just bring this out on the Y a little bit, and a little bit. And then with all these selected, what I'm going to do is basically shift over on the X a little bit, the X a little bit, the X a little bit, and then go back in on the X. And then same again, and the same again. So now that we've done that, that looks a bit too steep. We are going to add subdivisions later, but for now what we're going to do is Control L, go to our data properties, and then we're going to call this our armor, assign that, and then what we can do is go into our modifiers, generate, solidify, even thickness, and we want it to be our armor. And then what we can do is just change the thickness so it comes out a little bit. That's probably a bit much for my liking, if I'm honest. Maybe we can make it 0.5. And then for some reason, yeah, we've got this here, so normals we can... that's an issue, but basically there's nothing we can do. It's yeah, we'll leave it to it. In fact, no, because I want it all to be printed as one piece. We need to come back to this anyway, because we need to basically loop it round so it's more accurate, whereas these are just two separate things. So just to get rid of that, I'm just going to hide the face orientation, because there's nothing I can really do at this moment in time to sort of fix it. So yeah, now that we've done this, we can save, and then we can work on arm part number 2. So now that we've modelled the first part of our arm, it's time to move on to the second part. And looking at this, we've basically got what looks like a bit of a blocky shape, then it sort of ends, we sort of extrude out here, make this little bit of armour sort of additions here, and then it's an empty gap there. If we look at the Prism Marshal as well, we'll see that we've got the same thing. It's like a bit of a blocky thing, comes out here, sits just underneath our cylinders of the first arm, comes down, and then our third part of the arm is basically just basically the same, in the sense of it's wedged between these two gaps here, or that one gap, but it's to two items. So what we can do is basically just make sure that our cursor is in the center of these two here. So we're going to do Shift S, cursor to selected. We're going to bring in a cube, and we're just going to really scale that down, and then move it down to about here. We're going to try and line it up with our offset that's down here, and then what we can do is just make sure that our faces are wedged between the two here, and then just bring it up on the Z, and then scale everywhere but the X, so Shift X. And then because we are basically dealing with just basic shapes for now, we'll be adding all the details later, we're just going to move this down to about there, and then maybe bring this out a little bit more, and then hopefully we have this sort of shape here. So now the next thing is we're just going to extrude basically around about halfway on our cube, and we're just going to angle it so it goes a bit more towards our cylinder here, and then we're just going to extrude straight down. So to begin, what we're going to do is just loop cut about, I think it's just past halfway by the looks of it. If we look at our image again, it looks like it starts about here, whereas I reckon halfway is about there. So either way, you know, we can make it a little bit different, and then we'll just add a loop cut here, and then just move that up on the Z so it's about there. So now that we've done this, what I'm going to do is just add a loop cut here, and then I'm going to just loop select that, delete faces, select that, Control L, and then delete that again. And that's because we can just add a mirror modifier, and it makes our life easier. So now that we've got that, what we can do is select this face. We can extrude out to about maybe to our cylinder, and then maybe just that little bit more. and then we can just extrude down like so. And I believe, judging by this, we are near enough the same length as just the paneling piece. That's not including these huge circles. So yeah, I reckon we'll just eyeball it sort of thing. So we could maybe go a bit longer to about there, I believe. So now what we can do is we can basically just add the little bits of detail. So if we add a loop cut here, say, what we can do is just bring this one down a little bit just to curve it off. We can bring this one down as well just to give that a bit of a curve. And then the last part is, if we look at our reference image, we'll see that it basically looks like it sort of curves round towards the inside. So we'll just now work on that. So this is our outside, and then what we can do is just grab this, this, this and this, and then just move it over on the X like so. And that should basically be the primary component of what we've got. We can add a loop select here and just Control B to round it off a little bit, maybe to about there. So now we've got this second part of the arm. So now that we've done that, we can call this arm_2, and now we can focus on making arm part number 3. So now that we've made the second part of our arm, we can now make the third part, and the third part is basically this little sticky thing here. It appears to be about the same length as our second part of our arm. It's quite basic in terms of it looks quite cube shaped. On the other side we've got an inset and extrude, but again we're just going to get the main shape down and then add the details later. So with this we're just going to make a cube, wedge it between the two, and then try and give it a sort of rounded edge at the end, because it looks like our fourth part basically goes over this. So yeah, now that we know roughly what we're doing, it's basically going to be, yeah, a cube, give it this little angled edge here, and then like I say later on we'll do the whole insetting and giving it an extra bit of space here. So for now what we'll do is, with our cursor in the middle, we're going to import a cube, really scale it down like so. We're going to bring it down to our second part of our leg. We're going to just scale it in on the X, because what we're going to do is move it up, apply scale, and then with face mode selected we want to snap it to here and the other side to there. And then what we want to do is just bring it in, and then in edit mode select everything and scale it everywhere but the X. So Shift X, move it back over on the Y a little bit, and then maybe scale it down just a tad. So now that we've done that, what we can do is grab this face and bring it down and just sort of eyeball it. So that's near enough, I'd say the same length as this. And then lastly what we can do is add a loop cut here, another loop cut about there, then select that edge and this edge and move it in on the Y, so it's about there I reckon. Select this face, Shift D, right click, move it down, delete that face, and then loop cut this an odd number of times, so I'm going to do 5. Turn on proportional editing, make sure it's on connected only. And then selecting this edge, I'm going to just move it down slightly and then scroll in the mouse wheel so the influence is made smaller. And that's probably about right. So then with vertex mode, turn this off, and then basically make an edge there, make an edge there, loop select this curve and shift select the edge, make a face, and then do the same again on this side. Okay, there we go, yep, so loop select that and then make a face. And then what we can do is Control L and then snap it back here, A to select everything, M to merge by distance. And now we've made our arm_3. So now that we've done this, we can apply that, save, and now we can work on arm part number 4. So now we've made arm part number 3, we can now look at making arm part number 4, and arm part number 4 looks like we've got a bit of half a cylinder basically, and then we just need to align our vertices to meet up with a circle, and then basically just extrude down, and then that should give us this shape. And then what we can do for the other part is basically bring in a circle or 2 circles, extrude them both along their X or Y, and then join them together in the middle, and then extrude out, and then attach them both that way. And then yeah, we only really need to model half of this, because if we look at the left side here, we've got this little pointy bit, but we don't have it towards the top, but it's here towards the top on this side, but not towards the bottom. So what we can do is just model half and then just rotate 180 degrees, and then we'll get it on that side as well. Then we can mirror it to get the other side. Yeah, so to begin, what we're going to do is make sure our cursor's in the middle. We're going to import a cylinder and then just scale it down by quite a bit. Bring it down on the Z, and then we're going to just delete the top and bottom face. And then using edge mode, we're going to select our opposing edges like that. Right click and edge split, and then we can select one side, Control L, and then delete the face there. So now that we've got this, what we can do is just move this over on the X. And what we want to do now is we want to grab a circle. So we can just do this by basically grabbing our top edges here, Shift D, and then what we'll do is just move it up on the Z a little bit, then we'll Shift D again, rotate on the Y by 180 degrees, move it over on the X, and then link it back up. And then what we can do is just M and then merge by distance. So now that we've got this, what we need to do now is just rotate this circle on the Y by 90 degrees. And we just now need to line up our vertices of this cylinder to match up. So what we've got to take note of is this bit is on the outside, so it's on the same side that our armor plate is on. So we just need to make sure that it's this side that we've got. So if we look at our model, this is our outside, so it needs to be this side that goes up. So what we're going to do is go into vertex selection, and then we can basically just move that up to meet there, then that to meet here, and then we're going to start moving down. So now that we've got this part, what we can do is select our remaining ones and then scale on a Z to 0, which it already is, and then just bring them down to about here. So now that we've got this sort of shape, we can now basically grab our vertices here to the other side, and then go into edge mode select, and then select these edges, and then right click and bridge edge loops. So that should give us this shape here. However, we don't want it jumping up there, so what we need to do is actually just grab these ones, and then we just need to extrude down on the Z, scale on the Z to 0, and then put it back to here. And then what we can do is select all, actually no, we need to do Control L, merge by distance, and then now that we select this, we can move all the way up to there, go into edge mode, select these, and now we can do our bridge edge loops. So now we've got our sort of one that goes up towards the side, and then this one here. And then to make sure that we've actually got geometry to print, I'm going to select everything on the inside here, make a face, select all the loops on the outside, extrude on the X, I believe, like so. And what we can do is we can just select all, and then Shift D, move down on the Z, rotate on the X by 180 degrees, and then what we should get is that these can meet up with our other one here, and it appears to be that they're slightly offset. So what we can do is select all that's linked, and then move it over on the Y and snap it here, and then select all, merge by distance, and it will remove 27 vertices. And judging by this looks like it's a bit longer than our third part of our arm, just a tad. So like we've done with all the others, we're going to sort of eyeball it, so it's about here. And I think what we need to do is basically just make it longer because it's not supposed to be that thick. So we'll just scale it down till it looks about the right size. And now what we can do is we can snap it to the X, like so. We can move it up. So we've got this sort of shape here. Maybe move it up a little bit more. And then that looks right. So now what we can do is go into X-ray mode, select all of this, along with our edge hopefully here. And then we'll just move it down. And then we'll deselect that, and then we'll move this down the rest of the way. And how does that look? What we can do then is loop select all of this, make a face, modify, generate, mirror, and if we just compare it to this, that looks quite good, I think. It appears to be that we sort of raise up here, but again, we'll go through those minor adjustments after. So yeah, I'd say this looks about the part. Might just need extending on the Y, make it a little bit chunkier. So yeah, maybe make it generally bigger. Move over on the X and then snap it back, bring it down, and then what we'll just have to do is bring everything back up a little bit. And then what we need to do is this needs to connect somehow. So according to our reference images, these appear to be connected. It appears to be that we are somewhat bolted on. So what we might have to do is steal from the other arm and put the cylinder to this one. Oh, maybe not. It looks it. So with this one, it looks like we basically have this part to us, and then this part just basically goes inside of that. So what we can do is this snaps on to that arm, and then what we need is this snaps into this. So what we can do is basically come down here, and we've removed our circle by the looks of it. So what we can do is actually just delete this face, Shift D, bring that over on the X, select all, merge by distance, and then what we can do is get our remaining loops and then do an F there, and then select this basically, and extrude out, and then we'll turn on clipping. We will delete the face, select that, and then again snap that, and then this is our arm number 4. So if we just call this arm underscore 4, and now we can basically move on to the final section of the arm that basically gets duplicated, and then yeah, we can start generating our little manipulator arms and our flamethrowers. So save. So now that we've modelled arm part number 4, we can now look at modelling arm part number 5, and it looks like it's basically just this cylinder with a few inset faces. So yeah, quite a bit of a simple design. Might give it a hollow top so that we can put our tools and just slot them in. But basically, the issue that we've got is because we've got our top part, that clips onto these, then the second part of the arm is wedged between there, third part's wedged between there, and then the third part is also wedged in between the fourth part. So the fourth part needs this, and there's two ways we can do this. We can either just put this cylinder into that one, and then it's fixed in place. We'd have to print it at the angle we want it from this part. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to design, or basically make it so we've got a clip, and then I'm going to boolean the cylinder to the clip, and then we can still control what angle we want this at that's independent to this. So to begin, what we're going to do is apply the mirror modifier of arm part number 4, go into edit mode, and then Control B to bevel this, and then we need to select an amount of faces that equals more than halfway. So if we gather these ones and then basically look on the other side, and then we'll go past the halfway mark for those, we'll Shift D, right click, P, separate selection, and then this is now arm number 5. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically scale this everywhere but the X, so our clip has the ability to actually grip onto this, and then Alt E to extrude along edges. And then lastly, what I'm going to do is bring in a cylinder, really scale it down, and then I'm just going to basically line it up with here. And then while we scale it down on everything but the Z maybe, and then I'm just going to sort of put it in like that. And then what we can do is basically, it looks like it's the generic thickness, and then it will sort of, yeah, it basically looks like it gets slimmer towards the top, but nothing too major. So I'm just going to go into edit mode, bring this down to about there, I think. Judging by our arm length, it needs to go move by quite a bit, so perhaps about there. And then what we can do is maybe scale it out on the Z just that little bit more, because again, what we're going to do is loop select to about here, and then we're going to do another one that slides straight into it, and then we're just going to angle that in a little bit. And yeah, that's basically part number 5. We've basically just got the cylinder that goes in a bit, and then it's a bit thicker towards the top, which must be where our tool basically comes in. So now that we've modelled the thruster, the holder, the shoulders, and now the main arm pieces, we've basically got the individual tools and then the eyes left. I think what I'll do is I'll model the eyes next, because the tools are basically going to take a bit of time. So before we do that, we'll save our progress, and yeah, look at our eyes. So before we begin, what we're going to do is just join this to our clip so that it's called arm 5. And now what we can do is we can start working on our eye. So the eye is basically a sphere, and what we basically have is, as it starts to come down towards here, we'll basically delete these faces, then we'll fill this, and then insert extrude, insert extrude, insert extrude, then insert and extrude in, so that we get our eye basically here. And then after that we'll select some faces, and then delete this part of a sphere, fill everything accordingly, and then we'll import a cube that comes down, across and in. Judging by the other angle, we've got a bit of shape to it, sort of like it sort of comes down here and goes in up there, but we'll apply those sorts of details later. And then what we've got is our cube extrudes down, across, and then up, and then that's in the main body, and then we'll just have a piece of armor plating. Yeah, so to begin, what I'm going to do is import a UV sphere. I'm going to double the amount of segments and rings so that we have some extra geometry, and then we're just going to scale it down by quite a bit. Rotate it on the X by 90 degrees so our vertex is facing the Y direction. And then what I'm going to do is basically just move it about here, and then we're just going to scale it until it looks about right in terms of proportion. So if we look at the head here, we've got quite a big eye, so it could maybe be a bit bigger. And then yeah, what we can do is work on pulling things out. So that will probably do, and then what we can do is go into vertex mode, proportional editing, and then we want to pull it over on the Y until it looks about right. So I'd say there until we get this sort of egg shape, and then it starts to come down about here, so I'll probably delete this face and then Control L on the rest, and then that will give us that. And then if we come over to this angle, like I say, what we can do is we can make a face, inset it, and then extrude out, and then same again, extrude in, and then we can extrude out, and then I believe we extrude in or inset in one more time. And this one is going to be quite a bit longer than the rest by the looks of it, and then I'm just going to inset this and then extrude in like so. So this is our eye shape. So if we bring over our reference, we've got our drop, which is about there. And then we have our first extrusion, which is this, our second one, which is this, and then our third one, which is this. So this could probably come out a little bit more. If we turn off proportional editing, this can probably come out a little bit more, which means that can also come out a little bit more. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can do Control 3. So we have this angle, and then if we go into X-ray selection, and then if we delete maybe here up to there, and then what we can do is delete those faces. Make sure everything's neat and tidy, and if we loop select, we'll get everything. So what we need to do is select that vertex and this one, and make an edge. And then what we can do is control across, but that does that, so we can make a face here. Now we can loop select and make our final face. And then while we're in edit mode, we can bring in a cube, scale that down by quite a bit. And then what we can do is just move it up and across. Again, scale it a little bit more, and then basically just park it in there. With our face selection, we'll just move up on the X, and then I need to bring back our reference. So yeah, that looks about right, I'd say, and then we just need to bring it up here, like so, and then I believe it comes back quite a bit to about there. And now what we can do is we can add a loop cut here, and then grab this bottom edge and move it in like so, and then judging by it, the proportions are a little bit off, so this needs to come up a little bit, and then that can come down. And now this looks a bit too high, so now we can move this a little bit more, and then we just need to bring this in a little bit more that way. So hopefully that's our generic design. We've got the bit that comes down, then across, and then it goes in. So now we just need to make this little bit here. So I'm going to do that by basically using face selection, and then I'm going to just basically inset the face, move it over on the Y, and then I'm going to extrude down a little bit like so. Go into edge selection and then Shift S and cursor to selected. I'm going to spin this to 45 degrees. So yeah, 45 degrees, make it so it's one step, and then I'm going to extrude down. And already I think what I can see here is our stem seems to be a little bit thick. So I just need to resize this before we progress with the rest. So I'm just going to select here, here and here, and then Alt S, and then scale things down to about there, I think. And then what we can do is shift everything over on the Y because we're a bit too close to our main body. And then we're going to select this edge, Shift S, cursor to selected, select this face, move it over to 90 degrees. we're going to make it 2 steps so that we have a bit more geometry here. And then, judging by it, we need to extend up to about, probably about halfway of here. So what we can do is Control 3, and then we can extrude, and we need it about here. So if we move it to approximately there, and what we can do is one last time, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then we can rotate this 45 degrees, and then extrude a little bit. So now that we've got our eye, and then yeah, basically we can call this our eye, and it appears to be the part. So if we look at it from this angle, and then basically just get this, oh yeah, we need to make our armor plate. So for our armor plate, what we need to do is basically bring in a plane, rotate it on the X by 90 degrees, scale it in by quite a bit, and then move it over on the Y, and it appears to sit just below where this angle basically comes in. So we're just going to move it over like so. The bottom edge appears to have moved in, so this goes longer than our arm bottom there, so we're just going to move that in to there, move it in on the Y, and then what we can do is basically just make a loop cut in the middle, move it over on the Y, and then if we bevel this, it gives us a nice rounded sort of shape, like so. And then what we can do is select all, Alt E, extrude along normals, and then we can basically make our armor piece here. And then lastly, I need to add a loop cut here because it looks like our armor panel sort of curves in a bit. It could just be the texture that's of the image, but it looks like it sort of doesn't go straight up. It looks like it has a bit of a curve about it. So if I just go like this, I mean, yeah, it looks pretty straight, but I'm just going to loop select all this anyway. Oops, not that one. And then what we can do is just move it in on the Y, like so. And then it looks like, as well, the bottom part of our armor piece is also rounded, because if we look at our Fallout shelter, for example, it curves around like that. And even this one, it appears to curve round. It's a bit flat on the bottom, but from what we can see of the main hull, it appears to be that it does come down a little bit. So there's no harm in doing that. So what we'll do is select these two, proportional editing, and then just move down on the Z a little bit like that, methinks. And I've just realised I've got the top ones as well, so we'll do this again. We'll just move down like so. Cool. So if we just now merge this into this, and then what we can do is select both of these, Control J, this is our eye, and then we can just move it back so it sits about there. And that's pretty cool. So now we can focus on making the attachments or equipment, and then we can add a bit more detail, and then hopefully we can look at printing this soon. So now that we've modelled our eye, we can now model the equipment for the end of our arms. But one thing that I took notice of when I did a bit of a deeper dive with this is if we look at this, we've got this extra little bit that crops out here before we get to this like cylindrical joint. We can see the same with our buzzsaw, as you can see right there. And then if we look at the Marshall, for example, it looks like we have this same sort of joint sticking out here. And if we look at the director, we'll see that that is what holds our flamethrower in place. Whereas if we look on the other side, it's not really that visible. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to extrude out a little bit, add a cylinder, and then join it together, and then hopefully that'll be the end of our arm number 5 with no more adjustments needing to take place. So if we just focus on this and then come down and face select, if we just turn off our spin as well and our proportional editing, we can inset and then we can extrude down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to Shift D to duplicate this, move it down a little bit and rotate on the Y by 90 degrees. We're going to make it move to the furthest vertex point, which is about there. Yep. So then what we can do is extrude out like so. And then what we can do is Control L to select linked and then Shift D and then move it over on the X, and then again what we're going to do is we're going to snap it on the furthest vertex. So now that we've got that, what we can do is we can just select the top 2 faces, maybe the top 4 faces on both sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to extrude straight up and then scale on the Z. And then what we can do to hide this a bit more is we're just going to scale this out a little bit. And then hopefully that is our joints done. So now what we can focus on is we can put our attachment in the middle and hopefully it will be clamped in place. So what we can do as well is save our progress, and now we can work on our attachment. So now that we've modelled our Arm 5, part 2, we can now focus on the equipment. So what I'm looking at doing is with our equipment, it's basically just going to be the Manipulator Arm first. I feel like that will be relatively simple to model, followed by the Buzzsaw, and then we'll do our Flamethrower, only because the Flamethrower looks like it has multiple parts. So it's got this sort of cylinder with a spherical edge here. We've got our sort of hose that goes between the two. We've got this red something over there, and then we've got our Flamethrower attachment on the end. Anyway, so I believe what we're going to do is, like I say, we'll have the cylinder to begin with, then we'll extrude out, and then we'll just basically make this Manipulator Arm first. So to begin, what I'm going to do is select both of these faces and Shift D, right click, separate selection, select this, and then this is going to be our Manipulator underscore, it's more of a hand I suppose, Manipulator hand. And then what we're going to do is go into edit mode, select all the edges, and then right click and bridge edge loops. So now that we've got that, we can select the bottom-most faces. So I reckon we'll go for about a 6 or 8. Yeah, a 6 sounds about right. Or 8, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. So we'll stick with 8, and then we'll just extrude down a little bit. And then what we can do is we can scale on the Z here. It looks like it becomes a bit round. So what I'm going to do is actually pull this up a bit, and then we'll use the circle tool and we'll basically attach it that way. So like I say, what we can do is move it up a little bit, Shift D, right click, and then what we'll do is loop tool, circle, and then we'll just extend it out a little bit there. And then what we can do is extrude down. And then it looks like we somewhat come back to this square business here. So we're just going to basically cheat this, I believe. So scale on the Z twice, bevel it, so we get this. Then I'm just going to Shift D and then move this down. And then we can select those and then X and then dissolve edges. So now that we've got this, we can select this edge and face, 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 and then same on this side. And now that we've got this, we can Control L, move it up, and then stick it on there. And now we just need to make the arm parts. So, judging by this, I reckon these can rotate, that's probably what this circular bit is there. But judging by it, it's in line with the sides of our armour, of our armour plate. So our armour plate is here, so this is the side. So our manipulator arm actually comes out to about here. So if we just bevel this and then select this here, and then what we can do is we can select these faces, we can select these faces, we can extrude down, and then we can extrude again. And then what we want with this is we want to select both of these loops and then scale them away on the X, like so. And then what we can do is basically it comes out and across, and it goes sort of in, and then I believe there's another bit of a loop cut here in which we could basically just move it down a little bit and then scale it out a bit on the X, and then this should be our manipulator arm. We've got the square bit, we come out a bit and then it looks like it's got a bit of a narrow angle before it sharply goes in there, and then if we want, what we can do is we can just grab these edges and then we'll just bevel them so it's a bit more like that. And that's our manipulator arm done, and now we can focus on doing the other attachments. So we'll probably do the buzzsaw next. So now that we've made the manipulator arm, what we're going to do is just go into X-ray mode and we're going to grab the entire bottom part, and then we're just going to bring it down on the Z by a little bit, and then same with just this last little part, and then finally this bottom piece. And that's because when we look at this image, we'll see that our manipulator arm is almost the same length as arm part number 5. So now what we can do is look at making the buzzsaw. So we're going to copy the same process, we're going to duplicate the inside of this part to get it so it's clamped in. Then we're going to bring in a circle, scale that to the size it needs to be, duplicate it, scale it up a bit, then delete 3/4, so then we can make our guard. And then when we extrude this bit here, we're going to use that to make this holder for our buzzsaw. Then our buzzsaw will just have to be a separate sort of object, and then it will just have to be clamped in place through the use of our guard and our holder by the looks of it. So to begin, what we can do is come out of X-ray mode and then just move that over on the X. And like I say, what we'll do is with face mode selected, we'll select these two, then we'll just use number pad 0 just so we're focused on it a bit more. Shift D, right click, P, separate selection, tab out, and then select these, and this is now our buzzsaw. So now that we've got this, we can go back into edit mode, edge mode, select everything, right click and bridge edge loops. Go back to face mode, we'll select our bottom 6 faces, I believe. We'll extrude down a little bit, scale on the Z to 0, and then we'll extrude down again. So selecting back to our arm part number 5, we want to select the inside faces, Shift S and then cursor to selected, come back to our buzzsaw, edit mode, and then bring in our circle, rotate it on the Y, and then just scale it in until it's about the same size, if not a little bit smaller than our arm. So that's about there, and then what we can do is bring it down. We'll Shift D and then scale this everywhere but the X, and then what we can do is just have it about there, I believe. So we'll go into edge mode, and then what we can do is bring both of these up a little bit. So with this one, I want to move this vertex to match up. What I want to do is I want to move that vertex so it matches about there. There we go. And then what we can do is select all of these and then delete these vertices. Edge select and then extrude on the X by 0.0025. extrude the other way, so extrude on the X by negative 0.00225, like so. And then yeah, what we can do is select this, Shift S, cursor to selected, change our pivot point to our 3D cursor, loop select these two outside edges, extrude, right click, and then scale everywhere but the X so that it comes in, like so. And then this is our guard that's basically been made. So now what we can do is select our Buzzsaw. I'm just going to scale this down a little bit and then go into vertex mode, and then we're going to select and checker deselect. We're going to scale everywhere but the X to about up here, and then we're going to rotate on the X so that we get our Buzzsaw shape. So something along them lines. And then what we can do is loop select and then face, and then while we're here we're going to basically inset our face, and then because we've got our loop tools here we're going to click circle, and then I believe we may need to rotate this until it's not as brutal. And then yeah, now we've got this, what we can do is select everything that's linked, extrude on the X to about there, and then same again, we can control plus and then extrude on the X to about, that will be too far, so to about there. And then selecting our middle edge, we can basically just rotate on the X, maybe rotate it there and then scale it up a little bit, maybe bring it back, and then that is how we get our teeth. Alright, so now that we've got that, what we can do is select this, and we can now Alt E and extrude out a bit. We'll basically make sure it's got even thickness, and that looks about the part. And then we also just need to bring this down a little bit so we get the end of our guard, which is what we've got here. And now what we can do is we can make this fancy design in the middle, so that's just a matter of with face selection we can select both of these. We will basically inset maybe a little bit more, then we'll extrude along normals to go inside to about there, and then what we can do is inset again, and then this time we'll scale out on the X and then bring it out to about here, I think. Alright, so now that we've done this, we will inset again, and then what we'll have to do is extrude along normals to get this. And then lastly, what we want to do is loop select here and here, select both of these, Control B to bevel them, and then what we want to do is Shift D to duplicate them, and this is probably where it's going to get a bit tricky, so what we can do is select this, Control L and then H to hide, because now what we want to do is we want to basically get this to connect up to this up here. So we've got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 faces, so that means we can link up to 6 faces of this. So if we find out where our peak is, our peak appears to be about here, but the other thing is we've got a bit of an angle that we can see, so it sort of comes down and then up, so we can afford to go clockwise a little bit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and yeah, maybe 6. And then what we can do is extrude, and then what we want to do is sort of extrude straight up. We'll scale this on the Z, and that's to our cursor, so we'll make it bounding box center, but we can still just move this up a little bit. And then what we need to do is, there's a bit of an angle for this. So what we need to do is basically grab maybe that there, and then we can select these and that there, we can extrude out along our normals, and then we can do that again. And then what we need to do is select V6 and V6, extrude down, and then what we can do is, with that moved down a bit more, we can select these, move them down to about there, and then delete faces, and then delete faces. And then what we can do, hopefully, is loop select these, right click, and then bridge edge loops. And then same again, there and there, and bridge edge loops. And then what we may need to do, if we look at this, is, so we've got our circle that sort of comes down and everything sort of seems to angle sort of all the way back up. So what we'll do is we'll just select these and move them over on the Y to about here. We'll also scale them on the X to get them to sort of move away so it's not so severe with this. And then what we can do is select this, and then also move that on the Y to sort of meet up in the middle. So now that we've got this, we can loop select the inside and make a face, loop select the inside and make a face, do the same again with this, and then if we do Alt H, we've got our Buzzsaw back. So the issue will be now, how do we get our Buzzsaw to sort of sit in this? And what I'm thinking is, what we can do is basically, if we just remove this and this and this and this from our Buzzsaw, then do the same on the other side. Because essentially what we've got, actually, maybe if we just select that one, and because now we'll have to do that again, well, if we just select this and then delete those, essentially what we've got here is we'll have our Buzzsaw. So yeah, if we do Control Linked again and then hide that, we've got our grip here, and then our Buzzsaw basically just sits in the middle of those two. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that this has a closed circle, or a filled in circle. And yeah, there we have it, we have our Buzzsaw. So now that we've made the Buzzsaw, we can now look at making the Flamethrower. And the Flamethrower is going to be a little bit finicky because it's got basically 3 components to it. I suppose technically 4. So we've got this yellow cylinder, we've got, which I assume is the gas canister. We've got this red thing, which is, I would assume, the gas on, gas off. We've got the actual flame emitter, and then we've got the pipe that goes between the two. So if we look at the prison marshal, we get 2 angles of this. So we can see that the hose definitely comes from the yellow component, and then it loops all the way around, and then it just sort of goes missing. If we look at our director, he doesn't really help us all that much, but it does look like it sort of comes around and then goes into the side there. And then we can see that our on-off valve appears to plug into the side. So yeah, I reckon we're going to have to maybe freeball this, and then just hope that we get it close to approximation. Because the main thing for me is, how do we get it to connect to our stem? And I don't know if it goes between the yellow component or if the valve needs to go around it. So we'll just play with it as it goes, I think. So we'll model the Flamethrower first, and then we'll figure out how to connect it to the stem. So yeah, now that we've got our Buzzsaw, what we can do is we can also shift that over to the side. And yeah, so basically we know to begin with that our Flamethrower is going to be attached through the same means. So we're going to do this and then separate selection, select this, and then this is going to be our Flamethrower. Yeah, so what we can then do is go into edge mode, select everything, right click, bridge edge loops. And then yeah, so now that we've got that, we are now back at where we were before. So what I'm going to do is, I reckon what I'll do is we'll do Shift S so the cursor's to selected. And then what we can do is we can add in a cylinder. We're going to really scale this down and bring this over on the X, because what I want to do is I want to delete that face, bring in a UV sphere, and then we're going to scale that down. And then in fact, what we're probably better off doing is Control L, delete. So if we bring in a UV sphere and a cylinder, and then what we can do is make sure that we've got both selected, Control L, and then scale them both in at the same time, and then a little bit more, bring them over on the X. Alright, so now what I want to do is Control L for this and bring that down. We want to loop select the bottom half of our UV sphere, delete that, Control L, delete the other bottom half, delete this top face, and then Control L of the top, and then snap it to the bottom. Select both, Control L, merge by distance. So we've got the end of our gas cylinder by the looks of it, so we can rotate that on the X by -90 degrees, and then we can bring that just sort of back in, scale it down, bring it up, and yeah, so basically what we need to do is look at our reference, and it's quite a wide cylinder. Again, everything's going to be almost the size of this arm, so we know what our size scale is, so in fact we can actually afford to really increase this by quite a bit. And then yeah, we're going to just bring this over on the Y to about there, and then extrude, and then scale everywhere but the Y, and then come down like that, and then come out like so. So now we've got this rounded part, we've got the indentation, then we've brought it out, we've extruded this flat part here, which is this part here. So now we just need to make our curve. We'll do the curve bit last. So next we'll do the actual flamethrower component. So I think what we can do is we can do what we did before with this. We'll just give it a loop cut, bevel it, Shift D, right click, move it on the X to over here, and then what we'll do is we'll just select those two loop cuts, X, and then dissolve edges. So yeah, this looks like it's slightly ahead of our cylinder basically, so we just need to extend this on the Y, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically look at our director for this part. So this seems to be quite stubby to an extent, and then it thickens out towards here, and then it sort of straightens up a little bit. So yeah, what we're going to do is bring it down then a little bit. Then what we can do is, if we turn the end into a face, then it means we can extrude and then scale out on everywhere but the Y to bring it up. Then we can extrude along, and then what we can do is extrude again, because this is where our nozzle starts to take shape. And then yeah, I think we've got the littlest smidge of extrusion here. At least that's what I'm going for. So that little bit that I just did here is this very little part there. And then it's just some weird shape basically. That looks like it's the bit that the flame comes out of, and then I assume we just have some form of mini flame that's permanently on the go, ready to ignite the whole thing. So with this, what I'm going to do is Shift D, scale everywhere but the Y. It seems to have a bit of an oval shape to it, so we're going to scale it down on the Z, bring it up to about there, and then what we can do is we can extrude out, and then at the same time we can extrude in, sort of like that. We're probably not going to see this detail, so I'm just going to extrude in there. If the printer grabs that, great. If it doesn't, then no big deal. So now that we've created that part, it's now a matter of making that weird red top. So I think this needs to be, in comparison, a little bit bigger. then our gas cylinder, so I'm just going to increase its size to about there. And what we can do is we can increase this to about that, move that down, move it over on the Y a little bit. Yeah, so we've got this part. So yeah, now we just need to make that red thing, so just like what I've done with other parts, I'm going to fill that in, and then Shift D, and then that is our red part circle. So rotate on the X by 90 degrees, scale it down on everywhere but the Z. Then what we can do is move it over on the X, bring it over on the Y, raise it up by a little bit, like so, and then we can scale it. It's quite a big thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, it looks like it's almost the same width as the gas cylinder, so if not I mean, they are both roughly the same size really. I'm just going to eyeball it to about there. Okay, so now that we've got this, we can extrude up, and then we're going to extrude up again and then scale in on the Z, so that gives us our little shape there. Then I'm going to select this bottom face, I'm going to inset and then bring it down a little bit, like so. And then if we look at this one more time, it's a really pixelated image. We honestly haven't got the best image here, so if I again look at our prison marshal, it seems more rounded, this one. I'm just going to keep mine the shape that it is, and it looks like the pipe comes down and then goes in. It needs to attach somewhere. We'll just attach it to this part here. So what I'm going to do is inset, extrude down, and then what we can do is we can select our furthest most vertex on the X, which I believe is that one. Then it's Shift S, cursor to selected, face select, spin, and then we're going to spin it on the Y this time, move it over, and then it's going to be 90 degrees. And then, because it's a 3D print, it's probably only going to need about 4 steps, 3 steps, give it 4. Either prints it or it doesn't. That's my sort of philosophy sometimes with 3D printing. Okay, so we've got this part, so Control L, and then if we just move it so it's sort of inside. So now what we've got to do is I'm going to just shrink this a little bit. And yeah, what we've got to do now is we've got to make a pipe. So what I'm going to do is Control Shift A. I'm going to bring in a Bezier curve, and I'm going to move it to here. It needs massively shrinking, and then I'm going to drag it over again. And in edit mode, I want the back of it to basically go here, and I want the front of it to basically go here. This one needs to rotate on the Z, so it's 90 degrees probably, is that right? And then everywhere but the Y, so it's here. And then yeah, this one needs rotating on the Z by presumably, is that 50 degrees it reckons? So you know what, I can just grab these two and then scale on the X by 0, that'll do it. So now that we've got this, we can sort of put that there, and then we need to just extend this on the Y, but what we can also do is we can subdivide by quite a bit. Alright, so so if we turn our generate its curve to tube, and then what we need to do is scale. In fact, if we apply scale, then we can bring the scale down. I mean, don't get me wrong, this tube's quite thick, actually, looking at it. So now if we just grab this and sort of, where's our prison marshal? So it looks like the pipe goes straight down and then it sort of goes under and around, so that's what we'll do. So this has gone straight down, so we just need to make this also come straight down. It looks as though we may need to scale these up a bit, and if we can just curve it around like that, and then we also need this to sort of rotate on the Y to about there, and then like I say, it sort of comes under and around. We can probably afford to lose one of these vertices, and then what we can do is just bring that over on the Y, so it's a bit like that, and then this can rotate, maybe even scale. We just don't want any of these harsh like kinks in the hose here, so maybe I was wrong. Maybe we do need this extra subdivide to sort of come and save us. So we've got this. So if we look at our Marshall, we've got, it goes all the way around, and then yeah, basically it rises up a little bit before it goes in the back of this here. So if we look at this, like I say, it needs to basically raise up. So if we just sort of drag that over there, and then if we sort of oh dear. So if we just scale that down, up, down, down, up, down, up. If we bring that sort of over here, I mean, it doesn't matter too much that we're sort of intersecting with this. Right, so now that we've got that, we can bring the scale of this tubing down a bit because we want it to sort of fit in there. Yeah, I mean, why not? So what we can do is we can apply our curved tube. Cannot apply constructive modifier on curve, so we need to convert it to a mesh. Okay, so convert to mesh, converts that way, and then what we can do is Control J, and it's now all one part. So now it's a matter of how do we get it to connect to this. And I personally am thinking what we can do is come off the spin tool. If we just grab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if we just extrude that down to about there, and it's not going to look nice, but I reckon if we just extrude this down, then if we just extrude this all the way across, extrude again, and then what we can do is we can basically just extrude up into our geometry. Whoops. So if we turn on X-ray mode for one, and if we just bring that down a little bit, extrude up, bring that, and then what we can do is we can extrude across. I mean, it doesn't look awful, I'd say. So again, what I'm going to do is, just while I'm looking at this, scale it on everything but the Y, and then we'll just move it down, and then I don't know, we'll extrude to about there. And then what we can do is select our uppermost vertex, Shift S, cursor to selected, select this face, spin, and then we want to spin on the X to about there. And then I don't know, something like that. Yeah, this looks nice. We shade smooth. Yeah, maybe don't do that. Okay, so I would like to say that that's our flamethrower done, and in general, that's all of our components done. Now it's just a matter of adding more detail to different parts, then hopefully we can start looking at printing this. And that brings us to the end of part 1, in which we have modelled the main components to Mr. Handy. Join me in the next episode where we refine details and pose on Mr. Handy.